Hey, folks, and welcome to iWizard. So, I have a special guest today for this episode of Side Quests, is what we call this show. He is the best-selling author of dozens of books. He's best known for his Monster Hunter International series and Saga of the Forgotten Warriors fantasy series. He's written a ton of short fiction. He's edited anthologies. He is an avid gun user and advocate, and he's shot at a competitive level. He lives in Utah with his wife and kids. Welcome on the show, Larry Correia.
Hey, I'm glad to be on. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it, man. You want to turn up just a tiny bit? Is there a way of doing that? Just turning up a tiny bit?
Let's see. Okay, let me adjust. I put my head down here. And how's that? Is
Yeah,
that better?
yeah, that's a little better. Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
All
How
right,
about now?
so let's jump into
Okay.
this. Thank you. That sounds better. Let's start with this. How do you go from being a military contract accountant and a small business owner to writing fantasy and sci-fi lit? How did you get into this world? This is the first question I just asked Dave Butler. He was on my show about a month ago. I was wondering how he went from being a lawyer in, yeah, he went to NYU Law School and then became a lawyer for like a decade, and then he, turns to this grim business. So how did you get into this world, and what made you leave the old world of accounting and the gun store and all the stuff you were doing?
So I actually wrote my first novel back in college, before all that, and it wasn't very good. But I've always been a compulsive storyteller, and I've always been a reader, and I've read like crazy my whole life, and um, I'm one of those guys where you're just a storyteller, like you go into a room, there's a bunch of people, and then by the end of the visit, you're just the one telling stories. It's just your personality. I've always been that guy, and so like Dave, I took about a decade off and had a real grown-up job, and did a bunch of different stuff, and it was a lot of it was gun related, military related. It was a lot of fun. I mean, I was a civilian contractor, and but I was actually working at a gun store. I owned a gun store in Utah, and on my free time, my very limited free time, I decided I was going to try to write a novel again. And what started it was I was actually reading this number one New York Times best-selling novel, and it was just so bad. It was just so, and I can't rip on the author now because I met the guy and he's actually a nice guy. but
I won't
so
ask you
this,
who it is.
yeah, I won't ever say. And but I read this as like, wow, this is just, if this could get published, I could at least, I mean, if this could be the best-selling book in America, I could at least get published, right? And so I thought, what the heck, I'll give it a shot. And I was inspired, and I had some ideas. The original idea for Monster Hunter came back actually it was a discussion amongst internet gun nerds about lines we'd like to hear in a horror movie someday. And we were all just making jokes about how horror movies would go if they starred our people. And to me, that was just so dang funny. That concept of like take all the horror movie tropes, but put like capable, heavily armed people into it. And that's what I did. And it worked out really well. And actually, for a first novel, it came out really good. Looking back, I got really lucky, and I went ahead and I wrote that over the course of about a year and a half, on nights and weekends, and I was working crazy hours. I was a small business owner, and then actually sold. I wound up selling that to Bay and Books. Sorry, I should back up. I self-published it first after getting rejected everywhere. So I started out indie and I self-published. It actually did really well. This was pre ebook revolution. I've been doing this for about 16 years now, so I've been around for a while. So this predates the whole Kindle, revolution, and it did really well. And then it did good enough that I got attention of a big bookstore back east, Uncle Hugo's in Minneapolis, Minnesota. They loved it. They sold a lot of copies, and they actually brought it to Tony Weisskopf at Baen, and said, "You should buy this book because we could sell the hell out of it." And that's how it started. She read it, liked it, contacted me, made me an offer, and I was there ever since. So about 15 years, 16 years, I've been writing books for them. I think I've written about 22 books for them, and then I've written several books for other publishing houses. I've done some nonfiction now, and I'm writing for Athon. I'm writing for Arc Press, uh, doing some stuff for myself. I've just kind of bounced all over. So I think I'm on novel number 31 is what I'm working on right now, or
I
32.
tried to count before we went on air and I got up to like 27 and I was like, you know what? There are all these little, he did a Second Amendment book, which is really cool. He's
That's
done
fun.
these books with these other people. I'm seeing stuff with Alien and I just don't know how to count it. You know, do I count there's the target rich environment. Yeah, I got to
Oh,
count those.
yeah, because
And
I've got two short story collections. We call them Target Rich Environment. I've got enough short stories to do a third one. I've written a lot of shorts. And I have written for Alien. I have written for Predator. Um, I've done so many. I did stuff for Jonathan Mayberry's V Wars. Um, yeah, I've written stuff for all sorts of different people. It's been kind of a fun wild ride. And yeah, so that's why I got out of accounting. Is I so after I was at the gun store, I became a military contract accountant, and I was working there. And then the first book came out, and they didn't even know I was a writer. And all of a sudden, my books were in stores. And then, like within a year, because I was written more books since then, I was a New York Times bestseller. And all of a sudden, my boss was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Wait a minute! So you're a New York Times bestselling author? My finance manager?" Yeah, and
wow.
so I did that for several years until I basically just had enough of a backlist to make a living. And once I got to the point where I was losing money by not writing, and I was actually making more money as an author than I was as an accountant. That's when I hung it up and went full time, and that was about probably 11, 12 years ago now. If I can't remember the exact date, but yeah, it's been a while, and I've
That
been
sounds like the smart accountant thing to do. The moment that, you know,
yeah.
the opportunity cost of being an accountant by day isn't worth it. Yeah. Well, speaking of that, I find myself wondering how what you did in your former life influenced your writing. I'm not talking about the gun stuff. That's obvious how it
Yeah,
influenced your writing.
that
Um,
helps with the action scenes big time.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and you know the people, those of us who are Second Amendment advocates who enjoy the gun stuff, we appreciate what the verisimilitude. And but now having read a bit of Monster Hunter, I know that your main character Owen Zastava Pitt was an accountant, and from what I can tell, he's basically you. I don't, I
Way
don't
way tougher,
I don't know that you were
tougher
ever a
and
cage
smarter.
fighter, but I'm wondering how your early experiences shaped your work or how you approach it. So one of the things I wanted to know is how being like an accountant and how your background actually fed into you being a prolific and successful novelist, whether it was the work habits or whatever it was.
Honestly, work habits is a big one that people overlook because we tend to, as creatives, we tend to think about like the magic creativity faucet you just turn on and brilliance flows out. That's really not how it works. And we get people all the time was like, well, I can't write because I have writer's block. Well, I never was allowed to have accountant's block because I'd get fired, right? And that's not how it works. And
Yeah.
so this whole time, I've come at writing like it's my job. I treat it as a job.
Yeah.
I have a schedule. I have goals. I have goals that I must meet. I am my own boss, and my boss is a jerk. And so I don't get to go screw around until I have hit what I need to hit. No video games for me until until I'm where I need to be. And so, big part of it was like I think honestly is having a good work ethic. The accounting thing is actually funny because there's several guys I know who are accountants turned writers, which you wouldn't think that would, because accounting is like one of those on the old, it's not accurate, the whole left brain, right brain thing. Um, Accountants aren't who you think of as being like creatives, but honestly, I think it's because we have a lot of time problem solving. And I think the problem solving, well, high end accounting. I'm not talking about basic bookkeeping, but I'm talking like the stuff that like auditing and that kind of thing. You see a problem, you see a mystery, you see a red flag. Why is this thing here? Why do these things not add up? And I need to make them fit. Honestly, plotting is not that different mentally than auditing. It's I have a problem. I need to make this guy get here. I need to have some sort of action that will be interesting to the audience to get him to that place. And you just kind of like lay it all out in your mind. And I mean, I still use, believe it or not, I still use Excel spreadsheets a lot of times on projects when when I'm having to like figure out what year certain events happened in the past and how
Oh,
how did we get from did he need I need 5 years to get from here to here and 7 years to get from here to here. So that would put us
exactly.
he'd be 16 years old at this time, and so that kind of thing actually helps on the writing front, I think. So yeah, there like John D. Brown was an accountant. Dave Wolverton, Dave Farland was an accountant. Um, there's others too, and it's just funny that there's so many of us.
That makes sense. And what everything that you said, you sound a lot like my wife in the sense for an undergrad, she was an engineer as an undergrad, and then she went to college. Basically, the field is biogeochemistry, but it's basically she was working with Python and she's an Excel wizard. And so with our fantasy novel, she is the person who organizes everything, right? And so one of our characters will have a different color hair and she'll say, nope, I'm looking back at my spreadsheet and you got that wrong and the date's wrong here. And oh, you said it was 2 months ago. And so you're actually a lot more like her
Yeah,
on that front. I imagine there are a lot of engineers that could be good novelists as well.
I think it's part of anything is deep because big part of like successfully putting together a novel, especially a series, is attention to detail. And
Yeah.
it's like all those little things. And I remember
Yes.
I love Jim Butcher, and one time somebody was asking Jim a question because he's written so many books, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And he was doing an event, and somebody asked him, was like, "Hey, so in book three, you said so and so did this, but in book 15, you said so and so did this, and why was that?" And Jim's like, "I'm human." I mean,
Yeah.
we do the best we can,
Yeah.
and try to like keep everything straight. It's so hard. So this is a thing that my wife says a lot too. Is like I can't remember people in real life. Like I can't remember names. I'm terrible with names and faces. And so I'll see people and I'll be like, "Who's that?" And my wife will have to remind me, like in real life. I'll see somebody at church or I'll see somebody at the store, and my wife's like, "That's so and so." I'm like, "Okay, cool." And but the reason is I actually saw there's studies on this that the human brain can only remember about 200 people at a time as far as really
Dunbar's
remember
number.
them.
Yeah.
And beyond that, you
Yeah.
start to you start to lose people.
Yeah.
And that's also like what tribal society breaks down beyond 200 people, and you need some sort of government.
Yeah. Dunbar's
And
number. Yep.
the
100%.
problem with us, or with guys like us, is our 200 slots are taken up by imaginary people.
Yeah.
I can tell you about. I got 200 imaginary characters. I can tell you everything about them right now. That's why I can't remember my neighbors' names.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of that, because you were describing a bit of what your process is like. Here's another one, and I know this question is probably obnoxious and what cringy to you at this point. You probably get it so much, but uh, as an aspiring writer myself, I'm about 3 weeks away from finishing the final draft of a fantasy novel I've been working on with my wife, as I said, submitting to Arc Press. I'm just curious what your process is. Are you an architect or a gardener, to use the paradigm? How do you draft your books? How many hours do you write? Take us through the process of how you write, because I know it's different for everyone and there's no one solution. How do you write?
I am primarily an outliner, and most of my books have been outlined. And I'm one of the hosts on the Writer Dojo, which is currently on hiatus. But the other host is Steve Diamond, and he's a
Oh yeah.
discovery writer.
Yep.
And so we always have the discovery writer versus outliner kind of thing. But so primarily, I'm an outliner. My last two books I wrote, however, I did discovery writing just to experiment, which was actually a really fun experiment for me.
How
It
did that
definitely
go for you
really
then?
well, actually. I found out that it's a lot faster. The
Yeah.
process was a lot faster, like by far, but it doesn't lend itself to like anything super complex or interconnected. Um, and so, but those two books where I was writing a progression fantasy series for Athon, so actually having it just be fast and fun and spontaneous because it's progression fantasy, that fits perfectly with the genre.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, like if I was writing Son of the Black Sword, that had to be outlined. There's no way I could do that series without a detailed outline because that was just
100%.
so. I mean, yeah,
100%.
you've seen those, and those are just like
Yeah.
so many threads intertwined. So primarily, I'm an outliner, And the way I do it is my standard process is I have the idea that I need to work with. I'll have usually the whatever the kernels are, certain scenes, certain characters, certain ideas, whatever it may be. I'll start the outline. A total outline is really only a few pages long for me, though, because when I first start, because I don't do the super detailed outline. It's more that like this scene, this scene, this scene, this scene, right? And then I'll have like this character arc is this character arc is that. And then I'll make notes as I go. I'm not I'm not slavishly devoted to the outline either. As I'm going, if I think of something cool, like I have an outline that we're going to do this, and I think, oh wow, as I'm in the manuscript, I had this idea that if I changed something, it would be so much cooler or funner. Then I'm going to change I'm going to change the outline. The outlines, I will toss that part of the outline and then make it fit as I go. So I'm mostly an outliner, but I'm not a like super strict one, I would say. And I'm not a super detailed one either. I will usually do that process for however long it takes, which could be usually a couple weeks. And what'll happen is during this time, I'm not just outlining, I'm also like usually doing research or I will start writing. I'll start writing whatever parts I'm excited about, and that will also
Right.
get me kind of in the zone. I,
Yes.
I, I don't always write sequentially. I usually try to write sequentially, like scene, 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 But sometimes if I'm stuck on something, I'm not really sure how it fits. On my manuscript, I just put a little note, and my trick is XX because that's not something that ever appears naturally in
Yes.
text. And then I can just do a control F and I can find the XXs. And anytime I'm in a flow and I hit something that's like I don't know what to do here, XX, move on to the next thing I do know how to do. That way I'm not wasting time spinning my wheels. That was something I had to learn early on because sometimes you get stuck on a scene and you need time to percolate on it, how you're going to proceed. And I've seen writers waste weeks trying to like
Yeah.
figure something out.
Well, gosh, that might be the origin of what people call quote unquote writer's block,
Yeah,
which even as someone, I mean, I've published, a bunch of articles and things like that. I've published at, periodicals and outlets and stuff like that, my political thoughts and stuff like that. But uh, working on a book, I still haven't gotten writer's block throughout this whole process because I think it's similar to what you're saying. The moment that you get stuck, you go, okay, this is my job. How can I be productive? I mean, I have a day job, but this is what I'm striving for. I'm not going to fail at this. What can I work on now, even though I'm stuck on this chapter? I think that's a really good strategy.
hop to the next scene you are excited about that you know what happens, or go back and edit because we all got to edit. I mean, that's just a natural part of the process.
Right.
But don't
Right.
don't waste time. I mean, sometimes if it takes you a couple hours and you just got to like uncork your brain for that's fine.
Stare at the
That's
screen.
just
Yeah.
yeah. Go check your email, screw around on Facebook, you
Yep.
know, whatever it is. But don't get hung up. Like I see too many people get hung up, and honestly, and a lot of times the stuff they're hung up on isn't even really that important. So when you get done and you look at what they were hung up on, you're like, that didn't really matter anyway.
Right.
That
Right.
wasn't the crisis that you made it out to be in your head at the time as you're working through it. And I've done that myself, where I've really struggled with like some part of the book, like really struggled, and I finally figured it out, and I put it in the book, and it goes out there, and that's a part that no one ever even remarks on. Like it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's just a
Yeah.
thing, right? It's just a thing. It's not like a big scene. It's not like a thing that's sticks with them or a powerful moment. It's just like that was just a thing, and they went right over it, and no one ever mentions it. And
But
you're like,
sometimes
why?
that those details add to the quality of your book, the
It does.
extent to which you're focusing on these little details that we may not even notice, but that we subconsciously care about as we work our way through your book. I think
Honestly,
those, yeah,
the best world building is invisible world building.
right,
And when I say that, it's world building. It's stuff that it going on in the book that you don't even necessarily explain. It just is. But it's so naturally part of the book that the reader just knows what's going on and runs with it. You know what I mean?
right. Oh
That
yeah.
to me is the best world building in fantasy. It's like this thing is just there. It's just taken for granted that it's there. You don't have to like piece it out, but you explain it clearly enough that they get what's going on, and then you just run with it. Um, And so some of that stuff I've agonized over, and like the and then there's a running joke that how much stuff that I do research on that doesn't ever wind up in the books.
Yeah.
Like you've read Son of the Black Sword, I know. The World of Locke that has it's a fantasy world, but has fractional reserve banking. Okay,
Right.
does this ever come up in the book? No.
Not that I can think of. No.
It's I think we're 4 books into the series or 5 books into the series. There's like one small reference of it politically, and then that's it. But I figured that out. I had this all figured
Yeah.
out and how it worked politically and how it worked like between the different houses and the different casts, and I had that all mapped out. And this has never came up.
Well,
But
it's
I'm
all part of like making sure that your book feels authentic. We have
yeah.
a unique thing in our book that are the druids who are trying to topple this French Revolutionary style socialist, fantasy world in the West. These
Cool.
druids in the East, they distill whiskey. And so it'll be, 8 hours of research into how whiskey is distilled for one sentence, for 2 cents. You see what I mean?
I saw there's a Shammy Stovall cartoon, and she's a novelist and a cartoonist, and very talented. And she's got the novelist just typing, and it's like, and the samurai sat at his desk to write the letter, and she goes, "What kind of wood did they have in Japan in the 14th century?" And then it shows her like googling, and it's like 8 hours later.
Yeah, that's it.
He's the
That's it.
samurai sat at his cedar desk.
That's it. That's 100%. That's the perfect anecdote for that. And I know you're passionate about, you were talking about productivity and how you're your own boss and you're a hard driver. Your boss is a jerk and that's you, and how you'll move on to a different chapter so that you don't get stuck. I believe that you in the dedication to one of your most recent books, you dedicated it to George R. R. Martin. See, it's not that hard. That was great. What precipitated that decision for you? You only get one dedication per book, and it's kind of a big deal. And that made a big wave in the kind of like world that we orbit around. And I think the statement was. Um, well, I
Somebody
don't know
needed
what
to
the
say it.
statement was. Nate, why don't I ask you? I appreciated it, and my first thought was, uh, my feeling is, and I know George's is pretty old at this point, but he wasn't when his last book was done. Like he was young enough to keep going and really have a work, and he's still working. He's just not on the stuff we want him to work on. And my thought was, the fame has gotten to his head, and he's so big now that he almost doesn't have time for the thing that got him where he is. And so when I saw your dedication, I said, "Oh, what a
Well,
sweet moment there that
it,
was."
it was multifold, and it's funny because the reaction to that of me doing that, there was 2 reactions. Yeah, I'm dead serious, and the whole internet was split, and it was half of them were like, "Ha ha, that's funny," and the other half was, "How dare you?"
Really?
Oh gosh, I had
Wow.
so many people mad at me. I had a lot of people. Their Twitter avatar, their Twitter name was like Cersei Lannister Hufflepuff, or whatever. Was really upset at me, and Jamie Tyrion Ravenclaw or whatever, and they were all very mad. But the way so it's personal. So I have years ago I had a personal run in with George. We had a bit of a conflict between the two of us, and so there was a personal level that he was I thought he was just kind of a jerk to me, and that long story I won't get into it. But so I was like, yeah. So when I was a new writer, I had a little bit of a grudge there, but more than anything, really the reason I did it was there's this thing in publishing for the last few years, and I'm sure you've seen this, where new writers come along and they want to write, because epic fantasy has always been a series based art form where you go into an epic fantasy with book one, but you go into the expectation this is going to be 5 books, 6 books, 8 books, whatever, right? That's just the
Yeah.
nature of the art form. And that was how it was for the longest time. And new authors would turn out book one and people would try it. And then he would actually sell some books and be able to make some money, which enabled him to continue, which enabled him to write book two and write book three and write book four, because the people would try the books. But we got Martin and Rothfuss were the 2 big ones that they started a series and didn't finish it, and it soured the marketplace. Like
Yeah.
honestly,
Yeah.
like caused a real legitimate shift. in the buying habits of the epic fantasy audience. So all of a sudden, customers were like, I'm not going to try a book one anymore because I'm going to wait till the series is finished.
Yeah.
But as you know, economically, there's almost nobody out there who can write 8 books first and then release them.
Right.
That's just economic impossible because nobody is going to devote 15 years of their life or 12 years of their life, or if you're George Martin, 75 years of your life.
Too
To,
risky.
yeah. And the thing is, it kind of crushed the fantasy genre in that we lost a whole generation. So over the last 14 years, like how many writers, brilliant writers, did we lose because they wrote a book one and no one read it? I can off
I
the
have
top of my head.
genuinely not heard that argument before. That is really interesting. No
It's
one's ever
interesting.
said
So
that before.
if you go out
Not
there
to
and you
me.
talk, you can find 100 dudes like this who wrote a fantasy novel in the last decade and released it, and it just didn't go anywhere and it died. We honestly, in the last decade, have very few new fantasy series
Yeah.
overall, and the ones we do don't fit the mold of epic fantasy. And honestly, what happened is a lot of the market shifted over, and this is the same time that lit RPG and progression fantasy, which are cousins of epic fantasy, but different, and they started doing their own thing with a different kind of release schedule that people became accustomed to, and the customers over there are very happy. But the epic fantasy market really changed, and I've seen so many dudes that were talented guys who just kind of got squashed. And so we have, honestly, I feel like we have a gap in the generations of epic fantasy authors. Now, I started doing my epic fantasy series after this, but I was already established as an urban fantasy author and as an alternate history author, and I've written thrillers. And so what happened is when I released Son of the Black Sword, I was fine because I already had a sufficient audience that I was bringing with me from other genres. They were like, yeah, we like Larry's other stuff. We'll totally take a gamble on him and read his epic fantasy. So I was fine financially. And that worked out great for me. But I know all these other dudes that they wanted to get into epic fantasy first and just nothing. Because everybody's like, well, I got burned by Martin, I got burned by Rothfuss. I'm not going to try this new one until it's done. But that's a
Wow.
self-fulfilling prophecy now that it'll never get done because economically that's impossible.
Well, I realize that I'm guilty of that as well, unfortunately. I've seen over the years authors come out. I'm trying to think of series I was interested in. There was a Scott Drakeford, but there's only one, so no, I'm not going to touch that. Chris
Yeah.
Wooding or something like that. There's only one. I'm not going to touch that. Yeah, there have been, yeah, I'm guilty of that as well. And then when I think of what I'm doing in my head, I'm like, well, I don't know if anyone's going to pick up my book. Who knows if it's any good? I worked hard on it, but if no one picks it up, then I'm going to put one out indie style. And if no one buys it, then I'm not going to write another one. I'll do
Yeah.
something else.
Now,
And
the one thing we do have going for us is the market has shifted over that time frame. Um, so it was mostly like mainstream publishing would get the new author with the epic fantasy series pitch. They give them advance for book one. Then they throw it out there and flounder it because it's traditional publishing where marketing oftentimes just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. And if it
yeah,
doesn't stick, you're out. And most of these guys weren't sticking. So that's why I said we have a real dearth for the last we have a fraction of the new series that we probably would have any previous time. But a lot of people wound up moving over. So people were motivated, wound up moving over indie, where you can get away with different things. And I said a lot of guys
yeah,
that would have been epic fantasy authors wound up being lit RPG authors or progression fantasy authors, or whatever, you know. And so I think over the last 14 years, we do have that gap, that Martin Rothfuss caused gap, but we're also seeing a market correction as people have worked around it.
yeah,
But even then, we do have basically a whole generation where it just kind of got kicked in the nuts, and
yeah.
so that's why I was just poking fun at it when he
It
did
was
that, and
great.
people were like, "Well, you're just bitter." It's like, no, I'm actually okay. I mean, I made money during this thing, so I'm still all right. It was more that I spend a lot of time helping new guys and trying to promote new guys, and I've done a lot of that. And if you see me on the internet, I'm sure you've seen that, and I've
Yeah,
I've I've done all this creative writing advice stuff and business writing
yep.
advice stuff, and I like seeing people be successful. I'm a
Yeah.
big believer in the pie is not finite. The pie is infinite. We just make a bigger pie.
Yeah, the growing
You know?
pie rather than the fixed pie. They
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Well, a
we don't
lot of
want to commit
authors
the
are
lunch
the
fallacy. Yeah.
if you make a dollar, then you took that dollar from me.
No, that's nonsense.
Well, and we're also existing in a world where we're competing against television and
Yeah.
YouTube
Yeah.
and Xbox Live and Steam, and there's Twitch. There's a million things that people can do for entertainment besides read books. It's
Yeah.
a giant and vast market, and the thing is, you don't have to have the whole market to make a good living. You just need to develop a loyal fan base who really
Right.
likes your stuff, and it doesn't need to be massive. Um, you don't need millions. I mean, don't get me wrong, millions of readers is awesome, but if you have tens of thousands of readers, you can
Right.
make a living.
Right.
You can make a good
Yeah,
living.
that's interesting. My wife has said over the years as we've been writing this book, there's so much fantasy out there. The market's saturated. I just feel like it just feels a little deflating. And where are we going to fit in with this? And I say, no, honey, this is a good thing. It means people are interested in fantasy literature, and we want that. My buddies, some of my best friends growing up, guys that I was in a band with for a decade, they decided to go start a brewery. They invited me to start the brewery with them, and I said no, silly me, because it took off. And they started this brewery, and their whole thing is I know it sounds cliche, it sounds very sort of business cliche, but they have a kind of a growth mindset. They have a growing pie rather than a fixed pie. It's not a zero sum game, it's a positive sum game, that kind of thing. And they say they are so happy that craft brewing has taken off, that micro breweries have taken off because it's benefited them. It hasn't hurt them. It's the competition has benefited them, but that's also come with increased interest and that sort of thing. I want to switch gears here real quick. I want to make a confession here. For years, I did not, Larry, pick up your Monster Hunter series. I knew who you were, and I largely agree with your worldview. I call myself a conservatarian. I'm a big fan of the Constitution, and I had seen you do some clips on Fox about gun rights, and so I said, this is a guy I would get along with. But I would see your series in the bookstore and I would say to myself, well, this looks like it's pulpy and sort of guilty pleasure, mayhem and violence, and just
Yeah.
muscled guys shooting at things. So I just said, this might not be for me. And then I saw that you had this epic fantasy series out, and I just kept hearing great things from my friends, people I talked to on Discord, BookTube, friends of mine like Mike from Mike's Books. And finally, my friend Sam and I just decided to give it a go. And it was so good. And I was so happy I read it. I'm like, now I'm kicking myself for not having read it sooner. And so I wanted to ask you, what was that like going from, you know, urban fantasy with guns and cars and helicopters and bombs and the dialogue with the sarcasm and the modern references, and then making this switch to epic fantasy that's set in a different world with this Hindu-esque mythology. What was that like? Was it harder to write and conceptualize? Did it take you longer? Was there more world building that you had to do? I don't know. Tell me what that was like.
It's uh it's an interesting thing, and I decided early on in my career that I didn't want to be just the monster guy. Which and I actually got this from Brandon Sanderson, the very first guy who ever took the time. This is way before he got super famous, to give me business advice. So I met him at a con. I had just signed my first contract. He had just been announced as the guy doing Wheel of Time. Just to give you an idea how long ago this is. And Brandon took me out to dinner, and he just gave me a bunch of business advice of stuff that he wished that he knew when he was where I was. And one of the things he said is, he's like, I wrote Elantris. It was a pretty big hit. It was really popular, and they really wanted me to do more Elantris. But I decided I don't want to just be the Elantris guy. I want to do more. I want to be a broader, multi-genre kind of guy. And I that stuck with me, and so I did some Monster Hunter books first, and I love that. And they're action adventure pulp, X Files meets the Expendables. But then I decided I wanted to expand. I wanted to just not be just the monster guy. Now, there's some pros and cons to this. I'll get to the cons in a minute. But on the pro side, it's super fun to switch gears, and it keeps me fresh. Like if I wanted to make maximum money, I would just do Monster Hunter novel every year and spin-offs. Because Monster Hunter novels are money. Like they do really well. And the thing is, though, if I guarantee that if I did that, though, I would burn out creatively. I would burn out creatively. And so, being a business guy, yeah, there's maximizing my profitability, but there's also maximizing my longevity. And it's like, how long can I keep doing this? And I've not turned in a dud yet. Most authors, at some point, we hit our career where you can see where they kind of burn out, and
Oh
they'll be
yeah.
a good author, then they'll have a series of like a couple, three or books that just kind of suck. And we've all seen that.
Yeah.
It happens to human beings. But I decided I was going to bounce around, and so when I started doing other types of, so I did a series of thrillers, The Dead Six. That was the first thing I did out of the gate that was not Monster Hunter. Then I did the Hard Magic trilogy, the Grimnoir Chronicles, which was 1930s alternate history superheroes. Which, if you haven't read those, they're rad.
Oh, they look great. They
Oh,
look
they're so
so
good.
great. There's
That
just only
that's
so much time in a day. Yeah.
Oh, dude, that series is so freaking good, though. I'm so proud of that. But then when I did Son of the Black Sword, at that point in my career, I had really practiced a lot, and I really honed my craft, and like I felt like I was really good. Like I had actually gotten to be a good writer. I've always been a good writer, but I feel like there's that old 10,000 hours of practice to like master something. Or for
Yeah.
us, it's like how
Yeah.
many millions of words have you written? And I had gotten to that point. And at this whole time, my whole career, I had been told, oh, he's hack pulp, action adventure, brainless, shoot guns, beautiful, beautiful women, tough guys, which is all true. But also, there's some depth to what I write in Monster Hunter. It's actually, there's some depth in Pass Oath, and there's a lot of themes.
Oh,
And
we'll get to that. Yeah,
yeah,
I agree. I
but
agree.
um, but that was what I was known as. And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna set out to write a like hardcore, dead serious epic fantasy, like old school, like checking all the boxes of what an epic fantasy should be. And I was going to make it unique, and I was going to make it different, that's what I set out to do. And it was a lot of work, and that was a labor of love for about 10 years. Um, and I had the original idea when I was working on Monster Hunter Alpha, and I percolated on that for a while. The first scene was the knife fight at the dinner party scene. That was the first scene I ever wrote.
Oh, what a great scene. That's a
And
yeah, big time.
so I was writing on another book, and I listened to musical soundtracks as I write, and it was the Inception soundtrack, and the song was "Waiting for a Train" by Hans Zimmer. And I hadn't seen the movie Inception yet, and I listened to this song, and I was like, wow, that is such a great, and it just builds and builds and builds to this massive crescendo, right? And I was like, I want to write a scene that fits that. And so I sat down and I started writing, and I just wrote that one scene. And Son of the Black Sword came about years later, and that wound up in it.
Well, that's great
Uh,
that you give yourself that time to do that. You say, I'm going to stop this thing that's more profitable. I don't even know where this is going or if it's going to become something, but I'm going to take a couple of hours and I'm going to write this scene and I'm going to throw everything else to the side. That's pretty cool that you allow yourself to do that.
Sometimes I think as a creative, like if you have an idea that you're on fire about, I mean, you got to balance this with the stuff that pays the bills. But if you have an idea that you're passionate, like, oh gosh, this is brilliant. I need to do this right now before I lose it. There's been times where I've gotten up and like I had an idea in my head. I just couldn't sleep. And it's like 1 o'clock in the morning. And I've gotten up and I've written until like dawn, you know? Um, yeah, so I mean, this sucks for our spouses.
I
I mean,
know.
but your spouse is in this with you, so you get it. I mean, she gets it.
She's more
Um,
like you than I am like you on that. She
oh,
is the person who's thinking about the ideas from the book in the shower while she's asleep. Everything's happening subconsciously. I'm more of a compartmentalizer. I will
oh,
shut it off and put the gate up and then think about it when it's time to work again.
showering and driving are the two
Yeah,
times that I think I come up with the most stuff, honestly.
probably. Yeah.
I mean, because you're just there and it's just you in your head, and you're like, if this person did this and this would, wow, that'd be
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I set out to do Son of the Black Sword as like this, like a true epic fantasy, like hardcore and like deep themes. I mean, this series is about like what is the nature of man and genocide, and it's but it came out so freaking good, and I poured my
Yeah.
heart and soul into that series for 10 years, And so I would write something else. I'd write a book or two, something else, and then I would come back and I'd write the next book in that series. And I did that. Like I said, it took 10 years from beginning to end, but at the end, I that book six, man, I nailed that ending. Like I can say that like professionally
Oh,
speaking,
I'm
not just tooting
excited.
my own horn. I'm just saying analytically as a professional storyteller and editor. Uh, dude, I nail as far as the series goes. That series ending is oh, it's so
And it's done. So after
yeah.
book six, that's where the series ends.
Yeah, book six is the end, and it's out. It's not out in audio yet because we had trouble scheduling the narrator because Tim
Yep.
Gerard Reynolds is a big deal.
Yeah, oh yeah, big
He's
time.
a huge. He's a huge. When we started
Yes, he
10 years
is.
ago, he was like a pretty high level narrator. 10 years in, you got to schedule Tim like way in advance.
Yep. Oh,
He's a
totally.
big deal. Um, but yeah, no, so it's done. It's done, and I wrapped that up. And but switching between genres has been really valuable for me. It's funny because now the downside is business because I have one series that's my most biggest well-known thing. That's Monster Hunter. That's the one that pays most of the bills. Son of the Black Sword, solid. It's done really, really. It's done great. But the money is in Monster Hunter, and the frustrating thing is I will bounce between 4 or 5 different series now, but every time I announce anything that's not Monster Hunter, somebody's like, "When's the next Monster Hunter? When's the next Monster Hunter?" It's like, dude, I'm working on it. It's like if I let you guys schedule me, this stuff would have started to suck a long time ago.
That's
But the
right.
but the thing is,
That's
I,
right.
I write something else. I come back to the previous universe. I'm excited again. So by the time I get back, I've percolated for a
Exactly.
year, 2 years, 3 years. I've got a ton of ideas. I got a ton of stuff to run with, and um, and so I've been doing about two to three books per year every year for 15 years. Is how
Wow.
it's worked out doing
Wow,
that.
that's a great strategy, and I don't think that your Monster Hunter readers realize how much they appreciate the way that you're doing this.
Oh
The
man,
way that you explained it makes sense. You can't just be pumping these things out. It would become stale. You'd get lazy with it because you wouldn't be creatively inspired. Not that you're lazy, it's that it would dry up a little bit. So you're keeping that fire going, and I appreciate that.
it's
Um,
interesting because you could see so many series where you could see where the author ran out of steam
Yeah. Oh yeah.
creatively, and it's not just books either. We can see it on most TV shows. Most TV shows will
Oh
have at
heck yeah.
most a 3 to 5 year arc, and then they just run out
Yeah.
of juice.
Oh, absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. Uh Now here's another thing that I'm wondering. But what was it like trying to break into the world of epic fantasy? Because I talked about this with Sam, and this is the video of ours that you told me you watched, by the
I
way.
did watch
And
that. Yeah.
yeah, one of the questions I asked him, if you remember, was given how well the series as a whole has been reviewed, every book in the series has 4.6 or higher on Amazon. On Goodreads, it has an average of 4.5, which is excellent for Goodreads, which is a
Oh,
little
dude, because
harsher.
there are so many people on Goodreads who hate my guts.
Yeah, and that's good for any book on Goodreads. Your Goodreads is always going to be a few points lower. Um, I would say, as I told Sam, I honestly haven't met a real person yet who has read the books and didn't love them. So why isn't this book? I'm going to ask you this question. Why isn't it celebrated or talked about in the same way that Brandon Sanderson's works, or Pat Rothfuss's, or John Gwynn's, or Tad Williams's, or Scott Lynch? Why isn't this celebrated, or Robin Hobb, as why isn't it celebrated as the best that modern fantasy has to offer? I know that your books sell very well. I knew that already. Uh, I know that you personally have a large devoted fan base. You literally have a fan club on Facebook. So I'm not saying that they aren't selling or that you don't move books. You do. What I'm saying is, why do you think that the series isn't getting more mainstream attention?
Yeah,
Why are a lot
mainstream
of
attention, critical acclaim,
the hip booktubers, why are they
respect.
ignoring it? Because a lot of the things now, a lot of the thing now that sells books is booktubers. I mean, Christopher literally told me this on my channel. He said that booktubers were a huge part of starting to spread the word about his books. They're kind of not. reviewing it as much as you would think. I know Mike was reviewing some of them, and some other people, Sam and I am now. But and so I'm wondering like why the discrepancy there? Why isn't this getting the literary credit it deserves? Because I do
I can,
think it is
yeah, I can
really
explain
good
this. I
fantasy.
can explain this exactly. And in
Okay.
fact, the examples can be found in the YouTube comments of the booktubers who have reviewed me. And I'll put it this way. So, and in fact, Mike talked about this when he reviewed it, and he loves the series. I don't
He's
know if
my
this is
good buddy. Yeah, I love
yeah,
Mike.
and he's a great reviewer too. I've
Yeah.
watched a bunch of his stuff now ever since I found that, and I mean, I
He's the
agree with
guest
his
I've had
takes.
on my channel the most. I love Mike so much. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a sharp and analytical guy. In fact,
He
his
is.
biggest criticism of book two was actually like super accurate. He like guessed like that something was going on, and then I had to message him and go, dude, you are spot on. This is what actually happened.
I
Um,
bet.
he's analytical. He's very smart. But it was interesting. So the first time he reviewed me, he mentioned that I was a controversial figure because if you look me up, there's all this controversy about Larry Correia. And then, sure enough, he reviews my book, and immediately in the comments, there's like people like, Larry Correia is a horrible monster. He's so awful. He's the worst person ever. How dare you? And um, and it always boils down to I am when you list off all those authors, one of these things is not like the other. In that, like if you were to graph the politics of famous authors, and here I am way over on the right by myself, and there's like a scattering of dudes around me, and then there's like this giant cluster in the middle and the left, right?
Yeah.
It's just because honestly, it's an industry bias thing, and it's also the people who, and it's part of the whole broader culture war. And I've heard the same. I have a lot of friends in Hollywood now. I've been doing this a long time. I've got friends in the music industry. I've got friends in television, and honestly, basically for the last 20 years, we've been having this really stupid culture war, where politically it was like you are either in lockstep with us or you're subhuman filth scum, right? And about 12 years ago, I was in a point where my career where I was pretty solid. A lot of writers wouldn't talk about this kind of thing because they'd get stomped on. Because the entire here's another little fact, and this is one reason I love independent publishing so much is that 99% of Manhattan publishing is politically the same. There is no political diversity in traditional Manhattan publishing. It
This is
just
why like Stephen King can go on Twitter and spout off. I mean,
yeah
it's funny that you're seen. I even said this with Sam. I called you a firebrand, but which I think is accurate because you are, mixing it up with people. You're open about your philosophy. You don't mind sharing your views. You're an outspoken guy, but um, you take someone like Stephen King, no one sees him that way in the
no
mainstream. Now
no
we on
he's just a normal dude with normal
we
opinions.
right. We who are more right coded, we see him as a culture warrior. We see him as incredibly outspoken.
No.
We look at his Twitter feed and we go, "Oh my gosh!" Right? And
Yeah,
then
it's
when we
like
go to read his books, because I have enjoyed some of his books, we just ignore that and enjoy his books, right? So,
yeah,
um,
because he Stephen King's a talent. He's a talented
yeah.
man, but he really struggles with endings.
Oh, he struggles with endings. I've
Oh
said
my
this a
gosh,
thousand times. Yeah,
yeah,
he can't
but
end a book.
no, the thing is like, but he gets a pass, or like if
He gets a pass,
Pedro Pascal could say the most outlandish bullcrap
but
imaginable.
not Gina Carano.
No, she's out,
I know.
fired, and it's like, but this, so if you are, if you're Alec Baldwin, you could say all this horrible stuff, but if you're
Not
Adam
Billy.
Baldwin,
Yeah, Adam, right.
get
Adam.
out of here. And he narrated
Yeah,
Tom Stranger. He narrated one of my books. He's a wonderful man.
yeah,
He's hilarious.
yeah.
But yeah, it's just there's this double standard. And about 12 years ago, I was the point in my career where I knew that my fan base was loyal to me, and they trusted me. And so I went on a mission to kind of expose this in the awards, the world of awards. And that was just kind of, and it was like the great famous Sad Puppies scandal, which
Yes,
was
yeah.
like I see to refer to now as proto Gamergate, in the culture war. But what it was just me and some friends decided, you know what, this is bull crap. We've been like everybody with the wrong politics has been locked out of this system forever. We all know it. We all talk about it, but we can't talk about it in public because we get squashed. How dare you? And I was like, God, let's just expose it. And it's funny. So here I am, like 15 or 12 years later, and I'm still having people yelling at me like, Larry Correia rigged the Hugo Awards because he wanted to win so bad. And the funny thing is A, I turned down my nomination, and B, I rigged it by just getting regular people to vote.
By actually using the system how it works, how it's
Oh, I
supposed to
did the
work.
same exact thing as every other writer
Yeah,
before me, but
yeah, yeah.
where they go out and they would try to get their fans to come vote for him.
Right, right.
And we had literally dozens of examples of other authors doing this before me, but that was okay. When I did it with we called them wrong fans having wrong fun.
Wrong think. Yeah,
So when they were getting a bunch of people out of Manhattan to go vote, that was great. But when I got a bunch of people out of Texas to vote, that was like the worst thing to ever happen in the history of the universe. And
yeah,
how dare you? And
yeah.
but the thing is, but I became at that point the boogeyman. And I remember Orson Scott Card, and because Orson Scott Card was a firebrand before
He's
me.
the OG boogeyman, I
Oh yeah.
guess.
In fact, I saw a quote from Orson Scott Card once, and it was something to the effect of, "I don't know who these people's God is, but I know that I am their devil."
Well, it's funny about Orson is that I once told Mike I'm not a huge fan of Orson Scott Card, and he said, "Oh, what is it about his like worldview or something like that? Just enjoy his books." I said, "No, I kind of agree with his worldview. It's his books. I like
I
your
like
books."
I like the first Ender's Game, but like the rest of the series, I just couldn't get
Yeah.
into. To be
So
fair, but but like yeah, but like as far as ticking people off, that's what it is. And so honestly, and there's like a peer pressure now thing. Even though all this time has passed, just mentioning my name is like it's like looking in the mirror and
Voldemort.
saying Candyman 3 times.
Yeah.
A horde of angry people will show up in your YouTube comments and scream at you because
Yeah.
how dare you have this hate monger? And you're
Yeah.
like, well, what did he do wrong? And then they start like making crap up, and it's like I look at the stuff they make up, and they're like, that's not me. I was like, half that stuff, I don't know who you're describing. I don't believe what you're saying or the beliefs you're ascribing to me, but they just make crap up. And if I defend myself, then obviously that means I'm a bad person. That just proves the point. The thing is,
Yeah.
though, the cultural pendulum has been swung so far left in entertainment for so long that we're really seeing it swing back.
Yes, we are.
And
Yeah.
it's been funny because I've been on the front lines watching this for the last decade, and it's been kind of hilarious. And publishing is kind of we got there really early, and I think we're going to come off it really late. But there's a lot of stuff going on where half the it isn't half the country that likes to read. Everybody likes to read. I mean, or I
Right.
shouldn't say that's not true, but readers come from all sides of
Exactly.
life.
Yeah, we are having a reading crisis. Well, what's interesting is the data show that like the numbers in terms of the number of people who read is the same that it's essentially always been in America. It's just that a smaller percentage of Americans are reading now, and that's obvious to anyone who looks at the numbers because of course there's more competing for our attention and stuff like that. But to your point, yeah.
Yeah, and it's swinging back. We're seeing it in entertainment, and we're seeing it in video games, and I think we're seeing it in entertainment or in movies and video games swung harder, and now they're swinging back faster because
Yeah.
they kind of have to because the amount of money involved is so much greater than it is in our industry.
Yeah.
Like we are chump change compared to video games, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when you got like Ubisoft will go out there and lose hundreds of millions of dollars because they ticked off their core audience, you got to correct or die. And
Yeah,
so
but I
I,
would say sometimes we are the prime movers when it comes to culture because the films that are being made. I had a student say this to me. She said I was looking this up and I'm noticing that all the films that I liked over the last 5 years have been novels first, and the video games, many of them have been based on comics or novels, things like that. So I would say, in terms of impact, in terms of generating culture, in terms of it being, what would you say, generative, fecund, literature is where it's at. It's the core of things, I think. Maybe I'm
yeah, I think
naive.
we're one of the fundamental building blocks of it.
Yeah.
And honestly, I can
Yeah.
see why the successful movies would be based on novels because one thing is the market is just kind of sick of rehash stuff.
Yeah.
And we have thousands of great IPs out there that people can use. that can get books and adapt them into unique and original stories we've not seen in film before. And so,
Yeah.
hey, Hollywood, call me. Now I've optioned a few things, but that is such a squirrely world. Oh my gosh. I
Oh,
don't, and I,
when I was reading Monster Hunter, I was just thinking, I don't understand how this hasn't been made into a show yet. Not even a movie, a show with Supernatural, with Buffy, with shows like X-Files, with movies like Men in Black. This
it's the
Why
same
isn't this a
exact
television show? It's already all written for you. It would
it's
be
the same
so
exact
easy.
example as to why the booktubers are hesitant to talk about me. Even though Son of the Black Sword is so dang good, that series is so good that it is right up that alley. And that's undeniable, I think. I mean, just like realistically speaking, but that's the same reason I don't have a TV show. And I've gotten this straight up from Hollywood
That's
executives
it. Yeah.
because I am Larry Correia, and I have said Larry Correia things.
Yeah.
And I've had this. So I've optioned Monster Hunter twice. I optioned Hard Magic once. We're actually
Hmm.
currently in negotiations to option Monster Hunter again. But that's one thing I've run into and Tom Stranger once. And that's one of the things I've run into in the Hollywood world is that it does come up. Is like Larry Correia is he's an outspoken conservative Republican, and how dare you? And that
Yeah,
is the thing.
I'm a friend of this. This happened to, I don't know if you know about Andrew Clavin, the mystery writer. He's won Edgar Awards. He's a really talented guy. He runs a political podcast, and I'm
Yeah,
close friends
sharp
with.
dude.
Yeah, I'm friends with his son Spencer, who is a classicist. He writes for the American Mind. He went to Oxford. He's a really sharp guy as well, just like his father. Same deep voice, baritone voice as well. And they talk about the fact that, his father, Andrew, was he was writing all these screenplays in Hollywood. Michael Caine, Clint Eastwood, all these actors, Michael Douglas, were acting in his movies. He wrote True Crime, and then it just ended one day. The moment he announced that he had this political philosophical bent, this that stream got closed off, and
Yep.
he was done. He was out. I want to just go off of that really quickly. I know this is going to sound like a puff question or a softball question, but I'm genuinely curious about this. How have you not been canceled? People often talk about FU money. And you're a writer, so I know you do well, but there aren't a lot of writers with FU money, right?
No,
With the
I'm not.
exception, there's a Pareto distribution, right? With the exception of Stephen
Yeah,
King and
I'm not J.K. Rowling though.
yeah, J.K.
J.K. Rowling
Rowling
has
and Bill,
fu money.
John Grisham and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There aren't a lot of writers with FU money.
No.
In your case, we'll call it FU talent, right? Because honestly, you seem to be able to really be what an open defender of liberty and of values that uh, let's say don't play very well among a certain coastal elite set, and yet you're riding like crazy. You're getting all of these contracts. You're able to do it while maintaining who you are and your integrity when it comes to your values. And by the way, your philosophy and your values, it isn't even as someone who agrees with you politically, I don't, I really don't want to be lectured at, even by people on my own side
Yeah,
when I'm reading a
absolutely.
book. I want a solid plot. I want a good story. I want real characters, which is what I experience. I wouldn't know your politics from reading. Actually, I would these days. Unfortunately, these days, if you even know the difference between a man and a woman, like I kind of know your politics deep down. But but really, like 10 years ago, say, had I read your book, I would have no idea what your politics are when it comes to, say, son of the Black Sword, for
That
example.
that's why it
So
always makes me laugh because my critics will come out and they'll be all like, "Oh, Larry Correia just writes this right wing blah blah blah," and that tells me they haven't actually read
there's
any of my
nothing right
stuff.
wing in Son of the Black Sword, and I'm on
No,
book two now.
slavery's bad.
Slavery is bad. Or how about like the diverse cast of characters in Monster Hunter, or I just
Oh yeah,
it, and there's even
that's what I love. Where
ironic
they're all
sort
like
of
Larry
meta
Correia.
self-referential jokes in that book about how this would seem to be a lib novel given how diverse it is, but actually, we're all fighting monsters with guns and
Well, the funny thing is I was a military contractor, so the diversity was just actually kind of
Yeah,
uh,
natural.
it was just natural. It's just what I saw. I mean, those are the kind of people who go to war for us in real life, and it was just like
Yeah.
I just wrote that. Um, well, the thing is,
Yeah, so
I
explain that for me. How have you managed to have this long career? You haven't gotten canceled ever. You've had these controversies, but they're kind of just you just kind of,
yeah,
you
they
know,
tried. They have tried and tried and tried, and it's
but
hilarious.
it
And they've
hasn't
done
affected you at
so many
all.
things. Oh yeah, and I've been through the ringer, like pretty much everything of the culture war that you've seen for the last decade. Somebody's tried it on me. The thing is, I kind of was a pioneer because early on, people would attack you, try to cancel you, and what everybody did back then, they tried to be nice, they tried to be reasonable, and they apologized, even if they hadn't done anything wrong. I'm sorry I upset you, and then they would get quiet down, and then we'll let you live, right? I came along, and I was one of the first guys to say, nah. And I think part of it is I grew up on a farm. I grew up on a dairy farm. I grew up in a really, really poor small town. I got a real rough background as far as like I grew up in kind of a crappy place. And so I get out there in the world and I got all these little squishy Manhattan trust fund baby freaking gender studies majors trying to push me around. And I'm like, it's like I just spent the last, 10 years of my life shooting guns in the desert. That was what I did, for fun. And like, I'm gonna get pushed around by you dorks. No. And so they come at me, and so they tried everything. But I was one of the first people that just hit back. I didn't back down. I didn't give. I never apologized for it. If I had done nothing wrong, I never apologized. And they'd come at me and come at me and come at me, and they would lie, and I would meet the lies head on, and I'd crash through them. And they say, "Well, Larry Correia said this." It's like, no, I didn't. And this is what it actually is. Here's the tape. Boom. Um, and they tried to get they. One wonderful thing is I worked for Bay and Books, and Bay and Books did not care. Tony Weiskopf was the editor of Bay and Books, and she simply would not budge. She published me at the same time she published Eric Flint's card-carrying avowed communist, Trotskyite communist, which is funny. So even though me and Eric are both there, polar opposites, right? Bain gets labeled a right-wing publisher because they have me.
But what they have in common is that Eric's not woke.
Eric's not
And
woke.
and yes,
He's an old school communist.
he's an old school, and I can hang out with old school Marxists.
I actually miss
There's
Eric a
just,
lot.
I mean, what's that?
I miss him. I miss Eric. We used to
Yeah,
fight all the time. Every
yeah.
time we were at an event together, we'd start to fight, and it was great. And he was because he's an
Oh,
intellectual guy. But they tried. They tried to cancel me, and then it would just. But what I discovered too is that there was this resentment for these bullies, and there in that resentment was a marketing gold mine. So as they're attacking me, I would take their attack, kind of like a judo throw, I would use their momentum against them. And so they'd attack me, and I would take their attacks and I would weaponize them. And I'd be like, look at this 1-star review that obviously didn't read the book. And I would put it out there and I'd like make funny comments about it. And my fans would go nuts and they would share it. And it got to the point where people would like, do horrible things. My fans would go buy more books,
yeah.
and it would remind my friends, like, oh, Larry's got a new book out. Let's go get that too. And so I weaponize my haters for marketing purposes. And they hate that. And they
Yeah.
don't know what to do about that. It drives bullies. The worst thing in the world to bully is having somebody you can't push around. And I grew up in a place where physical intimidation was just normal and everybody fought and it was horrible and it was not a nice place. But I went out in this world of these little squishy cancel culture people and I was like, you guys don't scare me. It's like worst case scenario, if you ruin my business, I'm still a really good accountant. I mean, at this point, I could get sponsored by gun companies to shoot for them, so I can go do all sorts of different stuff. And so I'm getting screamed at by these people, but I just didn't. I just pulled through. And there was some that they're really hurt. They did some hurtful stuff, and stuff that I don't even want to talk about on the internet because if I talk about the stuff that actually was effective in hurting me, that'll just cause more of them to do it again. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But yeah, I've been doxxed, attempted swattings. They've threatened my wife. They threatened my children. I mean, I
Oh
went
man.
real like I'm not just talking about cancel, but like death threats. I collected so many there for that period. It was just a hoot. Um, one time I had to call my local sheriff's department because I was talking about the swatting thing, right? And so I was getting them, this is back when I really ticked off everybody and I was all
So
over the
explain to the
news.
audience what swatting is, because this is really insidious and
Swatting's evil. And it's also one
evil.
reason I live in the middle of nowhere now. I live in the sticks. Swatting is where you want to damage somebody, but you're a coward. So what you do is you call 911 and you report some sort of horrible crime occurring at the person you don't like's address. So you would call them up and you'd say, "Hey, this person is got a gun and he's threatening to murder his children." The cops are going to get this 911 call and they're going to be like, "Oh, oh crap, we need to get there right now. We got a man with a gun threatening to kill." And then they roll up hot.
That can get your family killed.
Oh yeah, people have died. And it's basically, and what'll happen is like they usually do this in the middle of the night. The homeowner or the guy getting swatted doesn't know what the hell's going on. All of a sudden, he's got a bunch of people banging on his door or kicking his door in, depending on what the nature of the call was. Guns drawn, people freaking out, flashlights in your eyes. He makes a sudden movement, bang. And they do this. They do this over politics because you upset them on the internet. And they're such narcissists that they think they're doing righteous things with this. And so one time another author, Mike Cooper, he came over to my house when I was on the phone with the sheriff's department, and I was talking to him, and I was talking to the deputy, and I was like, "You're familiar with swatting?" And the deputy's like, "Yeah," and his first question is, I'm telling him, I was like, he's like, "So what did you do to piss people off?" And I was like, "Well, I don't want to get too much into the politics. I don't want to offend you." And the deputy stops me. He goes, "Dude, I'm a sheriff's deputy in rural Utah. What do you think my politics are?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." And so
Oh,
I explained this to him, and the deputy's like, "Can I swear on here?"
yeah. Oh, of course.
The deputy's like, "Fucking nerds."
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
he's just like, but they fight so hard because the stakes are so low. But no, I live out in the middle of nowhere now, and so it doesn't do any good here because we all know each other, and they're like, "Oh, somebody's mad at Larry Correia again." "Hey, Larry, you're not like shooting the place up and holding hostages, are you?" He's like, "No, I'm good." What?
I want to ask you another question about this. It's somewhat related, but not as much on the exact same thread that we're going on. One of the weirder criticisms of your book, especially of like book one of Monster Hunter, now that I've read it, and I find this to be mind-bogglingly inane, but it's out there nonetheless, is the idea.
Strong
What?
female characters?
No, no. I
Oh,
mean, people would be
yeah.
surprised to find that the female characters are very strong. The idea that Owen Zastava Pitt, the main character in the Monster Hunter series, is far-fetched because, and I actually have one of these Reddit posts right here. Let me pull it up. This person says, and I quote, "Started Monster Hunter International due to some recommendations here. This has to be the most regressive, sexist, right-wing fantasy book I have ever come across. What the hell? The main character happens to be a massive, muscular guy who not only wins shooting competitions and is an expert in martial arts, but is also a brilliant accountant." And then it goes on. So, okay,
Never said he was a brilliant accountant.
last I checked, and this is hilarious.
Oh, sorry.
Last I checked, you are actually like 6'4", 6'5". You were actually a competitive shooter, Larry. You've been on like Brandon Sanderson's podcast to like share your expertise about how to write accurately about guns. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I know you've never claimed to be an expert, but you're literally training right now in jujitsu in your spare time just to get better at this martial
Yeah.
art. Um,
Oh,
Not to mention you literally were an accountant. So what
yes.
an odd I'm seeing this stuff that's so odd that people are ranting and raving about. How do you
I love
respond to that? How do you
in
process that?
a book with werewolves and vampires and a Wendigo. The most far fetched thing is you could have a muscular 6'5" accountant who knows how to fight good. Which I was like, mm, I am okay, and it's Owen's not a Mary Sue. I just drew from a lot of stuff. It was like when you're writing your first book, they always say write what you know. And I needed a career background that was something I was familiar with. I didn't have to. I was lazy. I didn't want to do any research. Plus, accounting is stereotypically boring. So the dichotomy of accountant to monster hunter was fun. Um, but yeah, I am 6'5". I used to lift a lot of weights. I'm old now. I'm almost 50. I love to fight. I've always enjoyed fighting. I've done all sorts of different amateur things. I never claimed to be good at it. I made Owen way better than me because he's an action hero. If it was me, I would die in the first scene, right? Okay, but he's an action hero, so I could take some. He is big. So no, we're the same size because honestly, I was writing my first book. It was just easier for me to write what I know, and I know what it's like to be a 6'5", 300-pound muscular individual. And back then it was more muscle. Now it's more fat. Um, but no, I love to fight, and yeah, I do jujitsu. I'm not good at it. I am a spazzy, high calorie kind of guy. But doing jujitsu does keep you humble. So for 2 to 3, times a week, I get my butt handed to me by 25-year-old MMA fighters. So that's good. That keeps me humble. Um, but no, it's like how is this unrealistic? And it is just like, oh, and I did. I won shooting competitions. I used to be a competitive shooter at a fairly high level, and I gave that up to be a writer. Um, I was pretty good, and I was on track to get really good. I was a sponsored shooter, so I had gun companies would give me stuff, and I got free ammo sometimes, which was really cool. But I was pretty good, and I was on track to be really, really good. And but it take that that is like any other. It's like a professional sports thing at that level. So you really do have to put in a lot of time. It's a lot of time. And at that point, I could either keep doing that or I could be a writer. And I decided I was going to try to be a writer. And so I gave that up. But I still shoot a lot, and I'm still probably 99.9 percentile of mankind with a gun.
There's just so much strange stuff out there, and I do think a lot of it is politically motivated. And here's another thing
I
with
mean, I
some
have
of
a
these.
range right out this window. I mean, I have a
Yeah, I've
range at my
seen you. I've
house.
seen you. I know. I've seen you with your array of guns, like practicing and shooting. It's just such an odd thing, and I think part of it is that people. I think that here's another thing with some of these criticisms too. In terms of Monster Hunter, I can only go on my experience of the first book because that's what I've read so far. But the idea that like Owen is some perfect guy, you mentioned like a Mary Sue or a Gary Stu. The idea that he's some kind of perfect guy is nuts. He's described as being ugly and scarred up, at least at the start. I won't give any spoilers. The girl he likes is taken by a hunkier and more attractive guy. He gets shot down constantly by her. He legitimately gets his ass kicked,
A
first by a
lot.
vampire, and then by that agent Franks,
I
or
love
whatever
that
his
scene,
name
by
is.
the way.
What's
Like it's like
that?
I love that scene. It's like make a distraction. It's like that. That was a lot of commitment to like get your ass kicked for a
He's like
distraction. It's like it
spitting
wasn't
his
on
teeth
purpose.
out, and then he keeps getting his ass kicked for the rest of the book. I mean, the criticism that Owen is some sort of Gary Stew is so stupid that I'm about to record a review video of this book, just a straight review. And one of the things I plan to mention in my quote unquote things I like section of the video is that he's literally not a Gary Stew. So how do we explain the phenomenon of people saying this? Like my question is Owen allowed to be really good at anything? Like
N- no, it's
I don't know if these like hyper online people who have no talent, but I'll just take myself. I regard myself as a rather unexceptional person. I sang in a fairly successful band for 10 years. I play guitar well. I run a booktube channel where I get to talk to people like you. I'm writing a fantasy novel that I'm almost done with. I know a lot about philosophy and literature, and I would describe myself as a talented teacher. So I'm not good at everything, but I'm really good at like 5 or 6 different things, and that's my life. And most of my friends are like that too. They're good at the things that they're good at. Why isn't Owen allowed to be like a person who's good at some stuff like the rest of us are?
because I wrote it. because it was written by Larry Correia. I've had people call Ashok Vidal a self-insert Mary Sue. Ashok. Think about that. Because what it is you get these people that get like a literary term like Mary Sue, and they'll get that in their head, and they think that, and these people are never well read. They almost never have actually read the thing they're complaining about. They've read the Wikipedia summary of the book they're complaining about, if you're lucky. And and we all know how reliable Wikipedia is. And yeah, and so so yeah, no matter what I do, I will get that. I have been accused of having being a self-insert on Ashok Fidel, and that was the one where I like completely like laughed my butt off. I mean, because for those of you that haven't read the series, the guy is a super warrior, yes, but he's also he's very clear as an American in the year 2025. He's very clearly on the autism spectrum, and I did my homework to write that as
Oh,
well as
I
I
did
could.
mention that, and I mentioned that before I even knew that you had intentionally done that.
Yeah, and so I mean, I did my homework to try to nail that. And I actually got a lot of compliments from people who were on the spectrum. Is like, oh wow, thank you. And this is before The Accountant came out with Ben Affleck, right? But
Yeah.
but the guy's a superhuman killing machine warrior, but he's like totally not me at all. And I thought, hey, that's a Mary Sue, a author self-insert, and I'm like, huh, what? But I've gotten that for so many things, so many things. But when you were first bringing up the Mary Sue thing, I was going to say that Larry Correia hates strong female characters. That's the other one that absolutely slays me because they say that they just throw that out there, right? They just make crap up and throw it out there. And I remember one time somebody said this, and one of my fans responded and like named like 36 of my female characters across different books.
Well, that if you hear that, that honestly, just even from reading book one, that just means they haven't read the book. They
I
haven't
know,
read the
and it's
book.
like it's like, are you wait? Are you well, I don't do the whole Buffy the Vampire Slayer waif foo thing where 100-pound women can beat up 250-pound men.
No,
I
right, and we appreciate that. That's just physics.
Well, and mostly it's just because I pride myself on writing better action scenes than that.
Yeah,
And so if I have a 100-pound woman beating up a 200-pound man, it's because she has magical powers
right.
or something of that nature. But most of the time, I'm going to bounce her off the walls until she shoots the guy, you know? And that makes for a better action scene. But if you do, one time I got accused of racism and I'll tell you why, for the most craziest thing ever. Um, you read the beginning of Son of the Black Sword, right? And at the beginning, and
Oh yeah.
it's based on India, like culturally. And at one point, the main character is the slaves bring him food, and it's rice balls, right? And he's just eating rice balls as he goes. And so somebody responds and goes, "Oh, Larry Correia is such a racist. He thinks that all Asians are the same and they must eat rice balls." And I heard this, and so my response was a Google link to Indian rice balls, and it was like 18 pages of recipes, right? Everybody who grows rice in the history of the universe has squeezed it into a ball at some point in time. Every culture. My son is currently in Peru. They have rice balls, okay? And so that was like, he's such a racist that he thinks Indians eat rice balls. I'm like, eh. And then another one I had, one of my favorite accusations of racism was from Hard Magic because I had, it's set in 1932. And if you know anything about world history in 1932, Imperial Japan were dicks, right? And I have a bit with the Imperial Japan in China. And if you know anything about like that, they were bad dudes. And it was like, I was racist against the Japanese. This book actually did really super good there, by the way. Oh, no. Jordan, you're muted. Sorry.
Oh, sorry about
Oh,
that. Yeah, I was just trying to make sure we could hear you. I totally forgot to unmute myself. Yeah,
oh.
I don't even know what to say about that. It's so
It
frivolous.
was so out there.
It really is frivolous. And I, being Jewish myself, I was reading your character in Monster Hunter and was thoroughly enjoying that. I just thought everyone got their fair shake. I don't know. I just
Well,
think
do
it's so wild.
you know Michael Rothman, the author?
Yeah, M.A. Rothman.
Yeah, M.A. Roth. So he's a good friend
I'm
of mine,
reading
and
Time Trials right now with him and
Dave
D.J.
Butler.
Butler. Yeah,
Yeah, and so he actually is my because I've had several Jewish characters in various books,
yeah.
including the Servant of War. I had a rabbi who was one of the major characters, and he Rothman is my Jewish reference guy because like anytime I need to do any sort of cultural thing, I'll put it in front. I was like, dude, did I get this right? And he'll be like, no, you say this and this. Like, okay, so
Well,
he's my
give me
go-to.
a buzz if you have any questions. I
I
was
will.
raised Orthodox Jew. I was bar mitzvahed. My Torah portion was Chaye Sarah. I'm about as Jewy as it comes. Ashkenazi
Sweet.
Jew, obviously, because I'm a white Jew. But before we move off the topic of Monster Hunter, I thought I would mention this too. It's funny, Monster Hunter International. Uh, the first book actually reads, or at least it did to me, like traditional fantasy. You have the ordinary hero. He's not a farm boy, but he's an accountant. You've got the evil monster from the domain of chaos that attacks the ordered homeland. I'm speaking archetypally. In this case, it's not a Nazgul attacking the Shire, it's the werewolf boss attacking the ordered workplace, the office building. You have the threshold guardian and the necessary, the training scenes that you have in a lot of traditional fantasy. There's usually a wise mentor figure, a wise wizard, or something like that. In this case, it's various experienced monster hunters. In a lot of modern fantasy, there's a school of magic or witchcraft or some sort of military academy or what have you. In your case, it's the Monster Hunter training camp slash fortress in Alabama. I really enjoyed the time that I got to spend there. You've got the friendly antagonist. By which I mean the antagonist that isn't the big bad guy that you want to kill, but is from the same team, Grant. There's the big baddie, right? The truly big dark force. You've got the prophetic, right? Fantasy dreams. There's literally elves in an
Literally.
enchanted forest, but actually they're trailer park elves, which is hilarious. And also there's stuff in here with Trip and Tolkien and the love of Tolkien and stuff. And so it got me to thinking that I almost feel like reading this first book. I was thinking I almost was shaming myself for not picking it up earlier because I get the sense that you've always been writing, in some sense, epic fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
You seem like someone who must have grown up reading fantasy, and that
Oh
seems to
yeah.
have inspired really a lot of what you do. Is that true? Or
Absolutely. You're spot on because I didn't grow up reading urban fantasy. Urban fantasy wasn't really a thing when I was younger. And even when I set out as an adult to write Monster Hunter, I hadn't read any urban fantasy. In fact, I didn't even really know that was a genre. It wasn't until I actually got published and I started getting put in it that I was like, oh, that's a thing. It's like I didn't know Jim Butcher back then, and who's kind of like the godfather of it. And I had read, I think, one of Laurel K. Hamilton's books at that period of time, and I think before that I'd read like Misty Lackey's Serrated Edge, and that was it as far as urban fantasy. But I read a ton of fantasy, like epic fantasy. All the classics, all the well-known ones. I'm Gen X, so basically everything from that 1970s, 1980s, 1990s era. I mean, so I did obviously the big ones, Tolkien, and then my first one actually was Terry Brooks. Um, but then of course I read like the Belgariad and Malorion and
David
all that, and
Eddings?
then
Yeah.
Raymond E. Feist, the magician, apprentice master, the Rift War saga. And then the Forgotten Realms novels and the Dragonlance
Oh
novels,
yeah.
all 800 of them when I was a teenager. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, but we had a library. And we had a library system. They had interlibrary loan. And so and we were poor. And so that was the one thing I could do is read. And so I read a lot. But epic fantasy was my jam as a kid. And I just kind of blundered into the urban fantasy thing kind of sideways. But yeah, so I'm sure that like Monster Hunter is just laden with epic fantasy tropes, and a lot of them I like straight up hang a lampshade on them, like Trip and the elves, and the orcs, actually, if there's a self-insert character in Monster Hunter, it's not Owen, it's Trip. Personality-wise, I'm more Trip than anybody else in there, honestly.
Wow.
Well, that's why he paints minis. He's a mini painter. I am a mini painter. I'd flip my
Right.
camera around and show you. I got like 5,000 painted minis in here. But
He's from the South. He's a Tolkien nerd. Yeah, it makes
well, I'm a
sense.
Westerner. I'm a Westerner. But I'm an
Okay.
adopted Southerner. But yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. That. But I love. So that was my character who through it was through his eyes that I got to take all the traditional fantasy tropes and kind of flip them and have
Yeah.
fun with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as the series goes on too, I kind of expand outward from there. And so a lot of those little things I get to like do whole big sections on, and it's just fun. It's just a fun series. So next one's in 2026 actually, and I'm really excited to get back to it because there's basically 2 books left in the Owen story arc. I mean, the Monster Hunter universe, I can still do a lot of other stories there, but for Owen's big story, we have 2 books left, and then that's the end of that. So it's pretty
Um,
wild.
so one of the things that this will be my last question, so we can get you out of here on
Oh
time.
man, we've been on for
Yeah. So you are coming out with a new series for Arc. I'm excited about Arc. I know those guys. I love what they're doing. I'm so happy. Couldn't be happier about what they're up to over there. And when we finish our fantasy novel in 3 weeks, we're going to be done with all the edits. We're submitting there first.
cool.
Um, I saw that you are putting out a book for them called American Paladin. Please tell us about that. That sounds so interesting. I had a friend who was saying all the books they've announced so far over at ARC sound really fascinating. Like they're off to a good start, at least if they can get these books out to the public. What's this going to be about? I know you announced it on Facebook, but I'm eager to hear it from the horse's mouth. You're not a horse. The horse's mouth.
Well, this one is kind of fun, and so this is something I've been thinking about for a while. One of the genres that I've enjoyed is what I consider like kind of like that lone vigilante genre, which with my favorite being Repairman Jack by F. Paul Wilson. If you read those,
I haven't.
and so basically it's a kind of and you see a lot of crossover. There's a supernatural side of things, but then there's also like the straight thriller side, and those are all your books like Reacher. Your Vince Flynn's, your Brad Thor's, where it's kind of like
Oh,
they're thrillers, but they're also
yeah.
like one dude who just like handles problems, or like the Equalizer.
Jack
Um,
Carr, that kind of thing.
yeah. So where it's like dude who just like he's just like takes care of the problems.
Yep.
Um, and so I wanted to do something like that, but also when Arc started up, they were like really interested in having me do another urban fantasy series, which I haven't done since Monster Hunter. I was like, okay, that sounds like a lot of fun, and I had this idea floating around for a while where I wanted to do, well, because I've done a lot of stuff set in the South. But I'm a Westerner, and that's where I grew up. And I mean, I grew up on farms and ranches, and I've bounced around, done manual labor all most of my life before I got into like got into college finally, and so I know that world, and it's a fun, interesting thing. I live out here in cowboy country, and I kind of thought, okay, I want to do urban fantasy, but out here this time, so a little bit different on that respect. But I also had this whole thing with the wandering vigilante problem solver, and so I was like, put those two together, and then we came up with American Paladin. So the name actually, I didn't have a title for it yet, but Paladin was already in the book, and where it comes from, there's multiple layers on that. So historically, you got the Knights of Charlemagne, the peers of chivalry, right? That was the original.
Yep.
Then you got the D&D version where it was like smite evil, lawful good, defend the right, defend righteousness. And then you had the old TV Western have gun will travel, right? Which was a Western guy went around, solved problems, took care of bad guys, shot them.
Yep.
So the combination of this, so the code name, the vigilante code name was Paladin for this character is kind of what like was like the street name, if you will, even though it's not really a lot of streets, more dirt roads. Um, and so the American Paladin name came from so I was using Paladin as the code name, but then it was actually one of the guys at ARC, David F. Sherarat, who suggested the name American Paladin because of the whole
It's so
context.
good.
Because it's modern times, it's a modern dude. I mean, he's a cowboy. I mean, it's just it basically could be anybody. It could be any of my neighbors, only with a whole lot more tactical training and a complete disregard for ever going to jail. And so I was able to like take like a lot of the Western myth stuff, and I'm a big fan of like cryptology or sorry, and the cryptids and cryptozoology. I've actually been a guest on a show about Bigfoot. I love that stuff. Love that stuff. I know I've never seen Bigfoot. No, I have not. And but I was able to draw on all this stuff from the Western United States, and also put this character who just kind of
That's
like
because you
goes.
are Bigfoot, Larry.
Oh, true story. My jujitsu nickname is Sasquatch. Um,
Makes sense.
the instructor just kind of he's a little Portuguese speaking Brazilian guy, and he gives
That's
nicknames.
valid.
Yeah, which is funny because this is literally the fourth or fifth time in my life that I've been given the nickname Sasquatch. I've never once asked for it, but every athletic thing I've ever done in my life, I've wound up being called Sasquatch.
So Portuguese, that's Brazilian jiu-jitsu then.
Yeah, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Very good.
And which is funny because I am Portuguese, but I don't
Oh,
speak
right.
it at all. And so I got
Korea.
there and
Right.
I had the Portuguese last name, and he saw that and he got all excited, and he started speaking to me in Portuguese, and I was like
Yeah,
sorry, my dad didn't speak it at home.
right. I bet
But
people call you a white man a lot, but your last name is Correa, and
yeah,
you are, that's a, I have a lot of Portuguese and
well, my dad is actually so my family's Azorian, but my dad's actually really dark skinned. So he had got most of that, I guess, the Moorish side of things.
yep.
And so he was like a really dark skinned guy. So that's another reason that the whole racism thing with the all these people is like, you're so racist. And I'm like, my dad is darker than Barack Obama. And I'm listening to this and I'm like, hearing this. And so I put up a picture of me as a kid with my dad, you know? Because my mom is super white,
Oh,
right?
that's funny.
She's like, yeah, she's one of those white ladies that turns translucent in the sun, kind of white,
Yeah.
but uh no, I took after her. But no, the oh yeah, so the American Paladin. So yeah, that's the name, that's the title, that's the idea. It's supernatural stuff, vigilante justice, dealing with otherworldly killers and a lot of missing people. And I don't actually, as a booktuber, this you'll probably appreciate this because one of the main plot points of the person that's in danger is a YouTuber who does a scary mystery show.
Oh,
Like they do those unsolved mystery YouTube channels. There's like that's a whole subgenre. But one of them is but this it's a host of one of those has gotten a little too close, and so
perfect.
must be
Perfect.
silenced by the other side.
Perfect. Well, it just sounds there's a lot of shows that are kind of in my wheelhouse that this sounds like it would be. The X-Files, I do love. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I love the
Such a
X-Files.
classic.
It's a classic. I know not all of the episodes are great, but I love it. There's Buffy. I love Buffy. Big Buffy fan. Angel, Roswell. That whole swirling orbit of I love a couple of the Men in Black films. Tony Hillerman novels. There's a lot of the
Oh yeah.
stuff that the Supernatural, the show Supernatural. There's just you're in that wheelhouse. I really feel like you have a niche. You kind of have a stranglehold on the older millennial sort of Gen X consciousness, and I think you're doing it better than almost anyone else. Larry, I want to thank you. We are basically out of time here. I want to thank you for coming on. I really appreciate that. That was awesome.
Oh, my pleasure, man. That was fun. Yeah,
Yeah,
anytime.
thank you
I
so much.
Hey, have a good one. Thanks for having me on, and I hope your listeners give it a shot, and hope they enjoy this stuff.
Yeah, good luck with all of your concurrent projects that you have going, and I appreciate you being so
I'm so
open with
buried.
us. What's that?
I'm so buried. I have so many deadlines.
I bet you are, and that's again why I appreciate you doing this because you are so busy and also generous with your time. So thanks a lot, man. And all right, see ya,
All
everyone.
right, man. We'll catch you later.
All
Thanks,
right,
Jordan.
bye bye.